I'd like to introduce the Honorable Judge Greg Pittman, Sandra, I don't know how to say your last name. Vanderhyde. She's the Circuit Court Administrator. And Mr. Hilary, Brad Hilary, who was CEO at Webb Chemical and has a very vested interest in how children are treated in this community. And I think the three of them are all in the same boat in that, so I'll let you guys take it away.
Thank you.
I will go ahead and start by telling you a little bit about this millage. It's called the Youth, Family, and Community Millage. The date of the election is Tuesday, November 7th. Myself and Judge Pittman, as employees of the county, we can only tell you and educate you about the millage. We're not here to tell you to vote yes or no, we're just here to educate you about what it is and why it even exists. This is only the third millage of this kind in the state of Michigan. This statute was actually created back in the 70s. Ingham County and Eaton County have both used this millage for funding youth services. The great thing about the millage is it can serve all youth up to the age of 21. They don't have to be involved in the juvenile justice system. And that's one of the reasons that we need this millage. We want to use it to pay for some preventative services. Because when you look at the stats in our community, you'll see that a quarter of our population lives in, is youth. A quarter of that all live in poverty. Our rate for neglect and abuse is higher than the state average and higher than the national average. We need this millage. What we're doing right now then, because Child Haven closed years ago, Webster House closed, if we need residential treatment for our youth, we have to send them out of county or out of state. They oftentimes go to these residential placements and do great. There's a structured environment, there's people there that care for them, they get the treatment they need, but then what happens? They come back to Muskegon, back to an environment that hasn't changed while they were gone, and oftentimes fall right back into those behaviors. So what we want is we want this millage. It would be for 10 years, 1.5 mils is what we're looking for, which on a house that's $100,000 taxable value would be about $75 a year. And what we would use this millage for is the preventative services that I mentioned, so we could do more school services, employment preparation services, we would do family-based services, and then we also need more residential placements than in our community, since the only one that exists is our Juvenile Transition Center. And what happens is, let's say a mom and a daughter, a teenage daughter, get in a fight. This happens, right? We've been teenagers before, we know that teenagers get in fights with their parents. If the child hits mom, right now what happens is the police bring that youth to the Juvenile Transition Center. This is a low-risk youth mixed with high-risk youth in the JTC. It can often start them into a life of crime, where had we not placed them in the Juvenile Transition Center and done something differently, it could have been prevented. What this youth really needs is just a break from mom. That's what mom needs as well. If we had respite crisis care just for 24 hours while we worked on a safety plan with mom and the child, that life of crime for that girl could have been prevented. There's an amazing stat in an article from a 2009 Vanderbilt study that shows that if a 14-year-old has a life of crime, the cost of that life of crime for us is $2 to $5 million. This millage would bring in $6.2 million a year. So it's really the cost of just 1 to 2 youth. If we don't stop the crime, if they have a life of crime, that is that cost. To me, that's amazing. What we pay for these residential placements that are out of county and out of state is $100,000 a year. That's the cost of that. What we would like to do is have respite care available in Muskegon County, crisis care, transitional living, because oftentimes we have older teenagers, we've worked with their family, we haven't been able to make progress, but this youth, there's still hope if we can get them into transitional independent living on their own, since they're at the end of their teenage years anyways and reaching adulthood. We'd like to get some of that. We need more foster care homes, and Mr. Hilary is going to share his story about being a foster parent. We need therapeutic foster care homes where we could have multiple youth, because it's easier to find foster care homes for younger youth, but not as easy for teenagers. So that's what this millage would go towards. So that is just what the millage is, why we need it, and what it would cover. And now I'll let you hear a little bit from Judge Pittman.
Good morning. I'm going to keep my seat if you don't mind. Thank you for being here to consider the idea of passing this millage. You folks voted me in, hopefully, most of you, some time ago, to be a good steward of the resources that are available in this community to attempt to address the issues that trouble our families. Strong communities are built on strong individuals who come from strong families. And where we are right now, in my mind, is at a very unique point in time in this community. And I say that because we have a level of collaboration between agencies who are the natural purveyors of the issues that involve children and families, unlike any time I've ever seen in the 20 years that I've been on the bench. We have come upon a time where institutions like Department of Health and Human Services, Health West, which used to be the old CMH, our family court and all that that entails, and agencies that help, like United Way, Community Foundation, and other agencies. We've come upon a time where the leadership of those organizations is such that there is a level of trust, there's a level of understanding, there's a level of communication, and there's a level of the appreciation that all of the people that we serve in each of our individual capacities generally are the same people that we serve to help make this community a better community. So, as we move forward with the idea of coming to the community and saying, would you help with this particular millage, I can say from this perspective that the people who are involved at the leadership levels are in tune, they are cognizant of the responsibility that they have to this community, and they're working together in ways that I have not seen in 20 years. We have the assistance and the cooperation of institutions like our Sheriff's Department, our prosecutor's office, our police agencies, along with these other things that are trying to figure out how to do this in a way that is effective and efficient. When I get a kid in front of me, ladies and gentlemen, I only have so many things that are available to me in my tool belt. And I just left a conference in Traverse City yesterday where I heard from some of my colleagues who have these really elaborate and really fully equipped tool belts. And the things that they can do in order to address the issues of the children who come before them are quite amazing. We live in a county of, as you fully appreciate, whenever Michigan's got a cold, Muskegon's got pneumonia, right? It's tough. Our neighbors right to the south of us, Ottawa County, are incredibly much better resourced and have probably a third, I would say a third to at least a half of the involvement with youth coming through family court. So what we are hoping to be able to gain from this is the ability to address issues that these kids come before us with in a more, I'll use the term holistic way. Give you an example. I utilize a residential placement called Glen Mills Schools. It's located in Pennsylvania. And folks, if you ever saw this place, you would look at it and say this is a small liberal arts college campus. Beautiful facility, magnificent place. Kids from here go there and they do very, very, very well. they get the kind of attention that they need, they get refocused, they begin to appreciate that their life is bigger than this 2, 3, 4 square miles of Muskegon, and that there's actually something that they can do in the world for themselves. Here's the challenge for me though. When I send them out to Glen Mills at a roughly $100,000 a year cost, as we are currently configured, the family that young man, or that young man, because it only takes boys at this point, family that young man leaves is exactly in the same spot that they were in when he left. He didn't become who he became strictly because of what he's seen or experienced or decided to get involved in when he walked outside of that home. There are things that are happening inside that home that create the environment for this young man to run afoul of the law and get into the kinds of trouble that bring him before me. What have I done? What has my staff been able to do to address not only this young man at Glen Mills, but his landing back in Muskegon? Done nothing. So what happens? We invest a large amount of money and effort and time into a proven program in Pennsylvania that gives us the results that we're looking for from this young man. This young man comes right back to Muskegon, heads right back into the same house, into the same dynamics, same bedroom if he's got one, same environment, and nothing has changed. What do you think happens? How long do you think that the good that we've done at the cost that we've provided continues to have its effect? Well, I can tell you, out of the young men who've come back, a good number of them I don't see anymore. I've also had 2 or 3 who come back who I had to send away to prison. I've had a couple come back who are dead, shot down in the streets because they came back. Eventually all the good kind of melted away and they found themselves back doing what they were doing. And I guarantee you, as I sit in these review hearings and talk to these young people, I see their parents or their guardians, the grandmothers, whomever is responsible for them sitting behind them. And they are appreciating what we're doing, but they don't get any of the attention that they should get. CMH can't, or Health West doesn't get involved like it probably could and should. There are clearly probably social service challenges that would be very well addressed if we were able to do that. There are health concerns that these folks have that need to be addressed. None of that gets done. This kid comes back, looks around and says, okay, I'm home. Time to get back to doing what I was doing. I'm not saying that this is going to be magical, but what I am saying is that it creates the opportunity for us to collaborate effectively, to create protocols that address not only that child individually, but that environment in general, and provide the opportunity for that kid to have a full, successful return back to this community. But let's go a little further. I don't want to have to send every kid to Glen Mills. Why don't we do some of these things here? Why can't we do some of these things here? Studies show, and anecdotally, in my opinion, it is shown to me that kids who remain connected to their families as they are being affected by the work that goes on when they're under the court's jurisdiction have that much closer connection when they are at a point where we release them from that jurisdiction. Let's go a little further. A few years ago, this community very graciously granted this county the opportunity to build what is now called the Juvenile Transition Center. And that was a good step, an excellent step. It was a building that was created with the capacity and the idea in mind that it could be a multifaceted approach to juvenile justice here, not simply a detention center. That's why we don't even call it that. Not just a place to hold and warehouse kids, but a place where effective programming could go on in different facets. It's designed in pods where certain activities can happen in this unit and certain activities can happen in this unit. Well, the good thought of that physical plan was not coupled, honestly, a bit short-sightedly with the funding necessary to actually conduct the programming that this building is clearly and very ably designed to deal with. And that's past administrations, that's past thinking. We won't dwell on that. But we are at a point now where we have to be, we have to go back and do a bit of our first works again and create the programming to make that building that was put into this community have the effect that it should have. So I don't have to send a kid away. I mean, Glen Mills is a dramatic sort of an example, but we're sending kids all over the state of Michigan. We should be able to work with them right here in Muskegon County. My tool belt, I said, is a bit light. I don't have answers for kids who are not at the level of needing to be detained and working through that program, but they need a place to land for a moment. The example that Sandra gave you. We get that all the time. I don't have anywhere to put them except into this transition center where they now become a bit more exposed to kids who can say, let me show you how to be a little better at being bad. That's a low-risk child. We sent in a low-risk child who probably does not need to be at that level of detention. And we returned from that a low-risk child who is now a little better versed at being a little higher risk. Simply because we don't have the protocols and the programming and the placements to be able to put them in the right place that we may be able to resolve at that point. You're going to hear from Brad Hilary, who, you know, thank God for people like Brad Hilary, who opens his home to kids who are in these child welfare cases, these abuse and neglect matters. But Brad, every now and then, needs a break. And others who do that work. Where do we put these children when they need that opportunity to have a break? Every now and then, he doesn't get kids who fall under the Hilary magic and are okay. They buck it. They fight it. These kids are hurting. They're traumatized. We need to be able to find a place where this child can kind of get their bearings without the wear and tear that we're going to put on Brad Hilary and his family. We don't have that anymore. We used to have that a little bit with child hate. You know, that was kind of a stopgap. That was a place where kids could kind of get their bearings. We need to be able to do that. We need to be able to categorize and place young people in the appropriate setting in our community to be able to be effective to get them back to their families in a more whole way. I think this millage and the people, more importantly, the people who are going to be responsible for stewarding the resources that this millage will generate are uniquely positioned. This is a good time for us to do this and to establish some protocols that will exist going forward when a lot of us walk away from these responsibilities that we have. So thank you. Thank you for hearing me. And I hopefully I've given you a little bit of a view of the thinking and the need for what this millage will hopefully be able to generate for this community.
Good. Thank you, Judge and Sandra. They know so much about the community and the need and the explanation and the numbers behind it. And I think some of you have in front of you some of that information. So I'm not going to go into that, but there's a lot of information there, so I would encourage you to read it. Unlike them, I can ask you to actually vote for this. That's part of why I'm here, to say, please do consider this, please vote for this, it is needed in the community. So just a snapshot on who I am, for those who don't know. My name is Brad Hilary. My wife and I have been in the Muskegon community as a married couple for 25 years. I grew up here. And in that time period, we had 5 kids. We had 5 biological children. When the youngest was old enough to go to kindergarten, my wife and I sat down and we said, what's next? And we prayed about it, and we felt the call to do foster care. And that was 11 years ago. We signed up and said, yes, we'll be a foster home in Muskegon County. Since then, we've had over 70 children through our home. We have adopted 3 of them. So our family is currently at 8 plus 1 more because we have a 1-year-old in the house right now as well. So we're very connected with the agencies, with the courts, with the hospitals in the community. And Judge Pittman really hit on something that I think is important, that the agencies and the government and the courts and the community and the foster care families really have started to come together in a way that's never happened before in talking about this issue in this community. Some of the numbers, though, that Sandra mentioned, I think is really important to go over again, because it's important as to what we're dealing with. We have over, or almost a quarter of our residents in this county that are children, under 18, almost a quarter. A third of those youth live in poverty. That's huge, right? But the other number that you should have on this sheet that's right below that, which is very important and we've seen a lot of, is almost a fifth of those children have considered suicide in the last year. Mental health is a big deal, and we don't have the resources in our community to help with mental health, especially of our youth. Part of this millage addresses that and helps with that, which is greatly needed. My wife and I have unfortunately had to be in the emergency room at Hackley and Mercy multiple times with foster kids who are trying to kill themselves. And that is a very difficult situation to be in. I don't wish it on anybody, because the hospital doesn't know how to deal with it. The folks at what was Community Mental Health, now Health West, they struggle to deal with it because they don't know all the details. And so they're trying to come in, and guess what? They don't have any place to send that child. That child is in your home as a safe haven. So if you have a problem, where do they send the child? They don't have an area. We've been in the courts and have been there and been frustrated with what our judges can and cannot do, because as Judge Pittman said, he doesn't have a lot in his tool belt. There aren't very many options. So it kind of comes back onto the foster home, which is okay. That's part of what we're trained to do. But, you know, we see the struggles, my wife and I, who are married and together and have a loving, safe home, trying to find these services for our own children, for our own adopted children in the community, because you still need that help. We are not professional psychiatrists. We are not professional healthcare givers, whether that's physical health or mental health. So we need the help of those folks in our community. And those services are lacking. They're just not there at the level that we need. This millage is going to help that. And it's more than just that kid, it's their family, and then the knowledge of what's going on in our community, because this is an investment to prevent higher costs down the road. Sandra touched a little bit on that, but it's huge. If we can get to these kids earlier, and my family and I talk about this all the time, right? How do we help families and children to stay out of the foster system, to not get there in the first place? How can we keep kids from going down the path of crime? Because it's hard to get out once you're in. It just is. He talked about sending the young men out into the Pennsylvania, but then they come right back and they're right back in the soup again. And that's challenging to get out. So it's really that preventative piece to try and get to more of the young folks earlier, to show them that there is hope and provide them with the services that are really, really needed. And then we can keep some of the kids out of the jails, and we can keep them from having some of these issues. And a lot of it is, they're not bad kids, they're bad circumstances. I talked to some folks a little bit yesterday, and we've had over 70 kids come through our house and go back to someone else. And most of those cases have been really good. They've either gone back to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle. In some cases, they've gone to another foster home that was interested in adopting. So the court system is 100% geared to take that child and reunite them with a family member. And that's what we want to do as the foster family as well. Sometimes that takes a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years. It can happen. And that can be frustrating, but that's the goal. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes the family is just not going to get healthy enough to have that child come back into their home. So we've actually said, okay, who else in the community, what other options are there to get that child into a safe home? And we've tried to work with both the courts and the agencies and everybody to do that, and there's no simple steps. But this is something that is needed. I know there's a lot of questions about it in the community. If you guys have some questions, they're probably going to be able to answer more of those than I can, but I can help. But from a standpoint of somebody who is having to use a lot of these services that are out there, and those that are not, and I don't know if it's on this page or on one of them that you might have, it is the word gaps. You didn't talk a lot about gaps today. There's a lot of gaps in the services in our community, and part of this millage is to start to fill in those gaps. So those services are available for our youth. So we're going to stand up and say, please vote for it. My wife and I, if you want to talk to me more about what we do and how we do it, I'm open for that. But thank you for coming and listening. And please ask questions, get clarification, and then share it. Share it with folks because a lot of people will simply vote no because they don't want a new tax. I get that, right? I don't want to spend more money if I don't have to. But this is a community millage that will benefit the community. It really, really will. So with that, I'll open it up for questions with anyone in the room.